Ponce, welcome to Métis Minute, your source for Métis news in Region 7. We have another candidate interview for you today, and this time it is a candidate running for the vice chair of the PCMNO, Sharon Cadeau. Sharon is the current vice chair and has a long history with the Métis Nation of Ontario. As you may know, many of us Métis folks are family. So before we got into the politics of the MNO, I wanted Sharon to let us know who she is. All right, perfect. Thank you, Sharon, for sitting down with me today. I wanted to make sure citizens who don't know you, some may know who you are, but for those who do not know you, maybe explain who you are, where you're from, and what your current role is.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Sharon Cadeau, and I am running for re-election as Vice Chair of the Métis Nation of Ontario. I have, I guess we'll start with the beginning. My father was a military man, and so I was born in Manitoba. It's kind of different for me when I tell people I was born in Manitoba. People assume my rights come from there because of what we hear is the heart of the Métis Nation, but it's not. My mom is from Manitoba, so my mom was working on a base, and they met each other, and so I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I had a fabulous life as a military brat. So brat, born, raised, and transferred somewhere, like well, brats, and it was great. Like my life was so different than anybody else's life. And I lived in Kingston, then we moved to Germany, then we moved to Nova Scotia, then Petawawa. And then when my dad, it was going to be Downsview, but he decided that this will be his last transfer. So that was the first time I was in grade 8 that I went to a regular school, not a military school, because we had our own school. We had everything there. I didn't have to leave the base. So it was very different for me. So everybody on the base was basically the same. So, poor, rich, there were words. They didn't have meanings to me. So you have to think in grade 8, I had a real big learning curve to look at a school and think, oh my gosh, like you could see the difference. And
Mm.
that was probably the hardest thing for me is getting to know that part of it. The cliques, but the rich people, the poor people, and you just think there's girls that went to school with the same clothes 2 or 3 days, and then there was other ones that were going on trips to Florida, and I'm like, Florida, wow, that's like I only fly where the military fly. We don't fly there, but yeah, so it was but in another way too, my life was not as enriched as most people because I didn't know my family.
Mm.
So in saying that, our family was just our family, just, my mom, my dad, my siblings, right? So in saying that, I missed out on a lot. Like, when people talk about, oh, my auntie and this and that, I can't say those things. So it was in 1999, my grandfather, well, I got to know my grandfather when we moved from Petawawa down to we moved to Mississauga, and I knew my grandfather and my immediate cousins. When my grandfather passed away in 1999, I went to the funeral and I met a bunch of people that I had no idea. My dad didn't talk about these people. And I never knew my dad was Métis because he didn't tell us at all. And so in 1999, I met my aunt, my great aunt, because my grandmother had passed away and never met her either. And and she was going, oh, and we're Métis, Aunt Maud, blah blah blah, and we're Métis. I'm like, and I'm 39 years old, and I'm like, what? We're
Mm.
what? It's like I had no idea. And it's like, so this big secret my dad was hiding was kind of unraveling. And, I talked to him about that. And I said, why didn't you say anything? He goes, we were told not to talk about it. And he in the military, definitely, even Cadeau have as a last name because being French wasn't really popular either. But he a lot of his family, like Bonneville, he would say, "Oh, they're English." No, they're not. you know, like he was, but that's what he told people. He told
Yeah.
people in order to get along. No, my last name's French, but I'm really not, and I'm not that either, right? Growing up, my sister and I, like my dad loved watching John Wayne and all of those things. And we would look at him and we'd go, my sister and I would go, he looks like an Indian, doesn't he? Like we would think that, but we had no idea that the truth would come out so many years later. So when I found out, I was like, wow, you don't even know who you are. I think at that point, you think, well, you feel that you need to learn something. And so my dad actually, his Aunt Madge, she was with the Métis Nation of Ontario. She passed away. And so my dad went and registered in 1999. Well, I was living in between, like at my sister's house, and we're, moving into a new house in 1999 at the end. So I waited to the next year. And when I went to register, I was told, I'm sorry, but you need to have genealogy done,
Mm.
and there's nothing in your files. And at that time, Georgian Bay actually had their own registry there too, right? And so I went up there. That's where everybody would go to register. And so they looked in my dad's file, and all he had is a driver's license and a baptismal record. And, the same in my aunts, but they knew who they were, right? And they knew who they were related to. So I had to be the one to say, okay, if I want to get involved, find out who these people are, I need to do research. And at that time, it wasn't online, like, just, like with Ancestry. So working full time, but I was lucky because I sometimes I would have days off during the week or I'd take vacation days. And there was, I'd be sitting in the libraries and, viewing microfiche and all of those things to find these people, right? And I did it. And so it took me to 2000. It took a year and a half for me to do this genealogy. And there are amazing people that I had in my like where I came from. Like these people like are so great. Like you get to know them, right? And you feel like you do when you're doing your genealogy. So that's where I come from. This is who I am. And I always felt around us, it's funny. You go into a room, and the first thing we say to somebody, you go, Samantha, who do you come from? Who are your people, right? And we
Yeah.
find out, oh my gosh, we're actually related. Like, like we all know where we come from. And so I have three lines that I come from the Georgian Bay area. And, I'm very proud of that fact.
Is that what maybe inspired you? Because you do currently, like you were saying, hold the vice chair role. Is that something that inspired you to get involved in Métis politics and pursue that role?
Well, when I was, I guess as soon as I found out I was Métis, it's like, what do I do, right? So
Mm.
there at one time, Region 8, because I lived in Mississauga, and we had one council, and it was Toronto,
Mm.
and it wasn't, for the whole area. And coming from this area and not living in Toronto, the outlying areas say, well, we're not Toronto people, so it didn't really fit. So I was there and I said, we need to split this area up, right? So I was, part of the group that was advocating for that. So I just kind of went to events with the Toronto Council and stuff like that. So I was founding, and I was the regional, I guess, women's rep at that time, 2001. And then 2003, I became the founding president of the Credit River Métis Council. And, so it was basically, okay, you have a council, you have no money. So you know what I mean? Like, so what do you do? We're going to learn how to write a proposal. Like the people up north, in the rights bearing areas, One of them, like she would go picking up bottles on the side of the road in order to get money. We had no money. There was
Mm,
no money back then. And from there, I became a regional counselor for Region 8. And at that time, it was a 3-year term. So 2005 to 2008. And then 2008, I was elected as vice chair of the Métis Nation of Ontario. It's always been I feel I need to be involved from the inside out, you know what I mean?
mm,
Like in order to move this forward and knowing more about where I come from and the Penetang petitions, I have like two direct lines, like two of my ancestors signed that. So to me, it's like I got to continue this, until it's done, until we're there,
yeah.
we're not there. They've been fighting for this since then.
Mm. Yeah, and you mentioned, yeah, you have the vice chair position and you've held that for quite some time. What are some challenges and things as your time as vice chair that you've maybe learned about what makes a good vice chair and what you bring to that role?
Well, a small portion of my position is being helping at chair a meeting. That's a very small part of the role. So I need to know what's going on at all times because if something happens to the president, the
Mm,
chair goes to president. And this happened in 2016, where the chair became president and the vice chair became the vice president. So that happens. So, but there's a lot of things that we do. And our code of conduct we've been working on our Métis rules of order because we need to get them to the table. We've updated them and we need to, so this AGA, they're going to be there finally. It's been like a 3-year like working on it, and we need our code of conduct. We need to have that there, because we see that other councils have been doing their own code of conduct, and there's certain things lacking when we get complaints, because that's another thing that we do. um, and I guess I used to be a municipal law enforcement officer at the Region Appeal for 32 years, and I've retired, so I think those kind of skills help me bring along, because it's bylaws. That's what we
mm,
do, bylaws. And it's like people get kind of, it's a maybe a boring thing for them, but to me it's not. And our bylaws are not fabulous, like there is things that are missing. We're going to be changing that, with our self-government. And, we need a constitution. Bylaws are thing of the past.
yeah, and we were talking about you currently live in Region 7 and the PCMNO is representative of the people, which hopefully every citizen knows that the PCMNO is there to represent you. Living in Region 7, what are some issues that you are seeing in the community and the ways that the PCMNO might be able to help the citizens in the area?
Like I'm not as directly involved in the citizens as our regional counselors would. And because that those are the roles, like we all have our different roles. I attend my community events, and when I'm invited to other community events, I go. I don't just make myself, you know what I mean? Like, but I do go and I go as a citizen, you know what I mean? Like I'm there, and I just love to see the questions that are being asked. And Owen Sound is my area. Sorry, Great Lakes Métis Council is my council. So, when you go to the events and you see the citizens and the kids, that's
Hmm.
what makes it for me. Because when I didn't have little kids, and they were older, and when you see them and they're proud of who they are, it's like my grandchildren now. My grandchildren know they're Métis, and they love going to the AGAs. I don't know what they do there with they call it play care, and they just don't want to leave. So that's going something to those folks that we have. We have great services and people that work for us. It's amazing what we have.
Yeah, and for Region 7, there's maybe we'll get into a couple of the issues that are currently concerning some Region 7 citizens, but yeah, there's been like recent boundary changes, and there's things happening in Moon River. So how do you think the PCMNO in your position as vice chair, are you able to make sure that like all citizens in Region 7, because like you said, there's a lot of citizens in Region 7 that how will you support the councilors as like they fight whoever wins in this election to make sure that all citizens in Region 7 are able to have access to some of those services? Like you said, have the kids go out and be able to celebrate who they are.
Being part of the issue in Moon River, I can't talk about that because I was involved with the,
Mm,
so I can't talk about that. Unfortunately, a lot of my stuff is confidential with issues, when we have complaints. Like that's what I deal with a lot. That's what Chair Rollinson and I do,
mm,
where we work closely with community relations. Um, so when we're talking about that, it's I know that there hasn't been a boundary change in Region 7. I know that there's wanting to be one,
mm,
but that issue, we're not top down. I don't know if people realize that.
mm,
Uh, we are grassroots, so our communities have always been the ones with the power, the rights. They're the ones that speak for the people. The president, locally elected, is the one that speaks for the people. And, the same as the women's rep and the youth rep and all of these people that are elected at a local level, they're the ones with the power. And it goes, and I speak on their behalf. I work on their behalf,
mm,
so that's how I making it simplified. So it's up to the community. So we have two communities I know that are talking about a boundary change, but as the PCMNO, we can't. We're just, if you need information or, we can be there to help and guide that process or, we can do all those things, but it needs to be left to those people that represent
mm,
the people and what do they want. But saying that, Samantha, moving forward in the next 4 years are so important
mm,
because there's going to be so many changes and so many people. Change is very difficult because everything that we know about the Métis Nation of Ontario is going to change. So it's provisional council. Well, that name's not going to be there. But when you think about who's going to be sitting around the table, not
mm,
everybody that's sitting there. Not, I'm not advocating for it. You have to be able to take your position and say, I'm Sharon Cadeau, and that's I sit as vice chair, so you need to divide yourself from that, and we need to look at each position that way. We need to know, and I always say, and this is probably, it's not my saying, it's part of a history thing but we have to know where we came from
mm,
in order to walk the future. In order to us to move ahead, we need to know our history and why things are there. Why do we have a youth rep sitting around the table? Why do we have a post-secondary rep? Like those questions I can answer for you, but can everybody answer them? It's we all need to know those things, and it's at one time we have to think back when we were first 1993, when Tony and Jean Tellier, it was in Jean's backyard where this came about, right? And Jean she used to be a ballet dancer or a dancer, and she went to law school. And so Tony and her, and so she was the first post-secondary rep. Why did we have that? Well, we couldn't afford a lawyer. She, she was
yeah.
going to school as a lawyer, but we couldn't afford to pay for one. We didn't even have any money at that time. And you think youth rep. Well, who do you think was the first youth rep and why? Jason.
Mm,
And why did we have a youth rep? Well, because he also was going to school as a lawyer. So, we had those two. So if you put them on a council, we have meetings, we can, put it, we can move around and bring our lawyers type of thing with us. Not that we were getting law information from them, but that's all we had at the time. And when you think about that, you have to think about, my gosh, well, there was no money. We had no money. And if there was, I think it was a small project of, is it 20,000? And, like these kind of things, reading the minutes to those things like are so amazing. It's so amazing to read and to see some of the names, like France was there in the early times, like France Picard. And yeah, it's just great to see. But moving forward, what's going to be around the table? Who's going to be around the table? Um, are we going to have, when you look at Alberta, they only have a president. And
Mm,
then it's the rest of the people that are representing, that are on the ground. It's like there is no executive, there's none of that. Right. So is that how it's going to be moving forward? I don't know. It's what the people want. It's not going to be me. It's, you have to look at things how citizens would look at things. What would they want? And those are the
mm.
important things moving forward. So we're going to have a lot of talks about that. And I just can't wait to get back into, and this Zoom thing that we got like through when it was COVID time, it's amazing because it's like we get to zoom in with our citizens a lot now. So we have our town halls, with citizens, and it's amazing to hear what they want and to hear their questions, what are important. And a lot of important things, is still like our harvesting is still so important to them. And about, I live here, but I would like to harvest, where I live, not my traditional area. So we still have a lot of work to do, so much work to do.
Hmm. Yeah, and you were talking about, yeah, being able to engage with citizens, and we saw with Bill C-53 to get it to where it is right now, we did see a lot of citizen engagement at events where they were writing letters and things like that. For the future of like Bill, you talked about it a little bit just right now, but yeah, for the future of Bill C-53 and Métis self-government, would you want to see a continued like engagement with citizens of what they want and keeping them engaged and involved in self-government?
That question, the self-government, that I get very excited about that. When you talk constitution, like I tell you, I've been at events and I'm sitting with Brian because, Brian Black, self-government table, and I'm sitting with them and I'm going, isn't this exciting? We get to actually do our I'm part of the crowd that's going to be, I was part of the Constitution of the Métis Nation of Ontario. Not everybody gets excited as I would, but because being a bylaw officer, you have to think of, that's where I was, and so bylaws to constitution and to like what is important to the people. And we need to get, and not everybody's engaged, not everybody's engaged. And that is the hardest thing. How are we going to do that? Because like some people, it's like, it's,
Hmm.
we got to make it digestible, like, smaller portions maybe for people. And I know Chair Rawlinson, he always said, well, do you remember that? And this is probably way before, I don't even think he would even know what I'm talking about. But in the States, they used to have these little commercials about Constitution and all this on this show. And it would tell you about a Constitution. It was the
Hmm.
American Constitution. And like something like that, like a cartoony type thing, make it fun, make it understandable, like even for our young people. Like I want my grandchildren who are 7 and 4, to, what's important to you? Like, we need to start even asking them so they can maybe understand, like, what do you mean important? Well, what would you like to see, in our nation? And I know it's hard for people to think about constitution and from going from bylaws to constitution to our when on our move to self-government, but because we're not like First Nations, we don't all live in the same community. So how is that going to affect me in my life, when you do your constitution, right? Like
Hmm.
how is that going to affect me? And I think that is the hurdle that we need to come across. But we need to come up with a way that we get everybody engaged, small or whatever, but we need to break it down so people understand.
Yeah, and speaking of First Nations peoples, So, as you said, like vice chair and PCMNO helps support the counselors, and the counselors are, as we move towards Bill C-53, obviously there's been some pushback from our First Nations cousins. Moving forward, is the PCMNO going to try to help with that?
You know, it's a good question, and I have to say that I was I've been around a long time, so I wasn't there when they got the song when they went to South Dakota and got the Métis song. But I was there when the song was at the traditional, it was at the powwow, and I was sitting, like I couldn't really see what was going on, but the whole community was there. And at that time, like we didn't have issues. We all worked together. But then again, too, we didn't have money.
Mm,
So, and I think, a lot of that has to do with, oh, we were never, they think they see us as a threat, I feel that they think, and we're not. And this is like from day one, like from Tony, President Belcour, from President Lipinski to President Fro. We don't want your pie. You know how like you heard Tony saying, well, we're going to go to the bakery, is
mm,
is down in Ottawa, and they're going to make enough pies for all of us because we don't want your portion. And that's the whole thing. It's while we were concentrating on ourselves, because I tell you, President Belcour, he was always, very close with the First Nations, and they were always at our AGAs. We had them always outdoors, and they were always there, and it was welcoming. When we moved to President Lipinski, it was still there, but it was like paying off our debt, concentrating on us. We had issues with MNC, all of these other things, and we don't have a lot of staff.
mm,
Tony was that person with the First Nations. He was that builder of relationships. So we have Tony back starting to build those relationships for us because, moving forward, it's one of the things that we forgot. And you can't have a relationship. I can't say, oh, remember, like you're my best friend, and then 20 years later, I come back and think we're going to have that same relationship. It's not
mm,
because what have I put into it for the past 20 years? Nothing. Where, you've been sitting going, well, I'm still here. Like, I don't know what happened to you, right? So we need to explain ourselves. They need to know who we are. And a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of the negative things, just like we see in the States, are the things that are reported upon and moved forward. So
mm,
anything good, that's not looked at as, and move forward, it's the things that are, they're taking over us, they're saying that it's here and it's, they want land, they want this, it's we want to be able right now we're incorporated. That's all we are. We're an incorporated body that we act as a government. It doesn't suit us, with the Métis Act, with the Ontario government helped us a bit, but not a lot. So it's to help us open up our door and to see and to be governed how we see fit and how our
mm,
citizens see fit. And basically, that's what I see about Bill C-53. It's opening that door. It might have some words in there that are alarming, like about land to the First Nations. But, I can't say it any other way. Are we going to forget about our history?
mm,
Look at Treaty 3 and the half breed Haitian up in Region 1. Now they're saying no, it doesn't pertain to you. It pertains to us. So rewriting the history to suit you doesn't make it right. So we have a lot of work to do, a lot of work. But I have to say, that's not how the people feel in the communities.
mm,
It's, the people that I guess right now, the chiefs or whoever are the ones saying these things. So we have a lot. I just have to say we have a lot of work to do. We've already started that with having past President Belcourt back to start those healing and
Mm,
to start with those our relationships again. Is it going to be overnight? No, no. But I can say I used to do a lot of work with the Mississaugas of the New Credit when I was part of the Region Appeal. So I brought down our director of children's services, and I was telling her, and so when I got introduced around the table, they're going, "Oh, with the Métis Nation. So do you sell memberships?" And and it was that time it was Chief Brian LaForge, Laforme, and it's like he just went back in his chair with his back. He go, and I said, "Aren't you going to help me?" And he's like, "It's up to you," and that was, with OMA. You know what I mean? Like, so that is what, so that's, I had to deal with that battle with them. And you just think, so it's not the good stuff. They don't hear about us. They hear
mm,
about, oh, selling the, your card in the, for whatever, and it's all there. We have to think positively and we have to move forward. And if we all can do our own small little thing, if you live near like a community, go to their powwows, just
mm,
be there. And, and it, I don't feel unwelcome. I don't, because I don't think and we have citizens that are living on reserve too. We have to remember that they've married, their partner is First Nations, and how do they feel? And I have to say, I met a family up in Thunder Bay where um, her her first daughter is the husband was her partner was First Nations, and the new baby is Métis. So that's a family, and it's a blended family. And she had her husband's grandma there, and it's like there we were at the same table, and it was family. Everybody, even, you know what I mean? Like we were family, we were talking. There was no divide in that. So
mm,
we have to think about those things moving forward. But I think of that family and other families that are sitting on reserve and how hurtful it is to them,
mm.
what's happening. So that's not right. Like that's my first thing for me. It's not right. We have
Yeah.
to, so if we each can do that little tiny thing, and move forward. Like we have Aurelia, so they have, Rama, they have a powwow. We should all go there, right? And yeah,
Yeah. No, I think we've covered, some of the main issues for Region 7 and things that are happening in the MNO right now. But to get that civic engagement and that citizen engagement in this election, why do you think it's important that citizens be involved and go out and vote this year?
I've always, I brought up my kids, as soon as they could vote, is to go and vote. And I've never been the one to tell them how to vote. I ask them to, well, what do you think is important? And read, what they have, to say with our regular, in our regular voting. And with the Métis Nation of Ontario, it's moving the nation forward. We're here, we're almost like Bill C-53 is like second reading, is past that. We're going into the third reading. It has to go to the House, then the Senate, and those are important times. We need to engage our citizens. We need to engage you right now too at voting, because we have regional councillors, running for election. Our youth, the youth council, it's amazing. There's a couple of people running in, I think the chair and Region 9, I think they're
Mm,
running. And I think that's amazing. It shows a healthy nation, really, when people run against you. And it shows that, people, no, it does though, doesn't it?
yeah.
People, it, but, this time I know it's not, with when you have everybody up for election and people are running, I know it seems more exciting, eh? But unfortunately, we got to make it exciting. You got to think, You got to vote, and and just to move it forward. And you have to think, who is that position? Who is better suited there? Somebody that has been there for a long time that understands everything, or somebody should we be changing it up for a new person at this time? And it's like those are the things that you need to think about, even with your regional counselors. Like, what did they do? How, you know, and what changes are they going to have, and who the experience and go on and so forth. But you have a bunch of good people running in the election, and it's exciting. I think I'm excited that the youth council, think about that. It's
Yeah.
like we have youth now that want to be engaged. I can remember when it wasn't like that. You couldn't get people, but it's
Mm,
amazing because our youth are our future. But we also need to engage our little, like my grandchildren age, and get
mm.
them starting to think. So how we're going to do that, I don't know. But even, starting with small things about what would you like to see, even if they would like to say, I think the president should wear pink on Tuesdays. That's something that they thought
Yeah.
of. And I think it should go on the wall to say, yes, we need to engage everybody. So we need to get those thinkers started very young.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like it is a healthy nation to have people wanting to run and wanting to be involved in politics and yeah, like have their voice heard and represent the community.
Yep.
Um, yeah, any last words for I know you're going to be at the all candidates meeting, so citizens will be able to have time to ask you questions there and come meet you. But is there anything until then, any last any last words you'd like to leave them with?
Well, I just want to say thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate it that you took the time to think that um, the Métis Nation of Ontario and the election was important, because it is. And I'm glad that you took the time to interview all of us. And hopefully, we have another platform moving forward.
We'd like to thank Sharon for taking the time to talk with us today. Sharon will be at the all candidates meeting from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. in Alcona. We encourage all Métis citizens living in Region 7 to come out to this all candidates meeting. You can ask the candidates your questions and find out more about why they are running. But we understand if you can't, and that is why Simcoe Community Media is going to be covering this event. And we want you to send us your questions so we can ask the candidates what you want to know. So if you have a question, please leave it in the comments of this video, and we'll be sure to ask the candidates. Merci for watching, and we'll see you down the river.